So, hello and welcome back to another episode of Interviews with Experts. I'm your host, Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Be. Every once in a while, we encounter a story that reminds us that honeybees can provide us with much more than just pollination and hive products. Sometimes they provide a way back to ourselves. Today's guest has lived a life defined by movement and resilience. His journey began among the rugged landscapes of Maine, a path that was eventually marked by years of significant personal challenges and a search for direction. That search led him across the country to Washington State, where he finally found his home in the company of honeybees. Through the bees, he found a new path, one of healing, purpose, and a deep-seated passion for the natural world. He is the force behind Rebel 44, and he's here to share how the honey revolution is changing lives, starting with his own. Please join me for a raw and honest conversation. Here's AJ.
Hi, everybody. My name is AJ with Rebel 44. I'm a bee steward out here in the Pacific Northwest. What we do is hyper-local targeted nectar flows through seasonality through the Snoqualmie Valley. And with that, we're able to work with the bees in partnership with the bees and extract 14 to 16 different varietals of honey from different elevations.
Wow, you said a lot in a short amount of time there, AJ. So I want to welcome you to The Way to Be. I'm really glad that we met at the North American Honeybee Expo, by the way, and we should probably acknowledge Clifford Struhl,
For sure.
Bee Smart Designs. We met at his booth. And before we get started on what you're really into right now, let's talk a little bit about one of the things you said when we had some honey tasting there. You mentioned that you're using a lot of BeSmart equipment in your apiary. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. Talk about making things easier and creating a success story out of somebody that doesn't know anything about beekeeping or stewardship. When I hooked up with Cliff at Bee Smart Designs, I started with some of his integrated pest management equipment that the bottom board, I really love that it's got the 3 entrances that you can close off. It's really easy if you're going to move any bees from yard to yard. The big game changer for me was that insulated inner cover, that R10. I spent a couple of years, I built my apiary at my home, my first apiary in a frost pocket. And they don't see the direct sunlight from October to March. It's against a tree line, and things I just didn't know. So I had created Vivaldi boards with corks, and I was actually out there in the middle of the night removing the corks and looking for moisture, thinking I could regulate their moisture in ventilation better than they could. So I've done all of those silly things as the first time, a couple years into beekeeping. When I got the insulated inner cover, I realized having that R10 on the top and not needing to insulate the sides allowed that water to drip down so that the bees could utilize that in the winter, because they need that water to break down the honey. And sometimes it's very difficult for them to go out of the hive to collect that water when it's cold.
All right, let's talk about back up a little bit on the Vivaldi board. You don't happen to listen to Jim at Vino Farm?
You know what? That's funny, because that might have been where that name came from when he first started building his new hives.
Yep. The Bee
Yeah,
Barn is what we're
yeah,
talking about there.
yeah. Boy, that guy's put some real effort into his work.
Yeah, and he abandoned actually that Vivaldi board, which is from Vivaldi's Four Seasons, is the music. If people are into classical music, then that's where that actually came from. And it was
Okay.
venting and using quilt boxes and things like that. And it had passive airflow that took humidity off. But Jim has abandoned that completely, and it sounds like you have too. So you've gone to a condensing hive maybe setup.
Condensing hive configuration. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And even this year, some of my singles, I run singles and doubles, maybe back up Langstroth 10 frame hives. I have 2 8 frames, but 99% of my stuff is the Langstroth 10 frame. I'm probably half doubles and half singles this year as far as going into winter. And, I was very successful with singles last year, but I 3D printed a round circular connection to go into the hole of the R10 insulated inner cover. and put that fondant. I know that you like to do the double bubble in a super. I actually bought those foil pockets, and I can fit a High Voly fondant into those pockets, cut a hole. And so I'm just heating the fondant instead of worrying about heating the whole super cavity.
Okay, hold the phone. You just said foil pocket. Is this like the shipping pockets that
Yeah,
people use? And
yeah.
they are metal faced, like aluminum faced?
Well, they're actually double bubble,
They're
and
double
it's
bubble, but is there any facing on them, or is it
yes,
actually a shipping envelope?
it's it's an envelope you would put in a shipping to keep something warm or cold.
You're the first one to bring that up. Is that cheaper than straight up buying double bubble?
Oh my gosh, Fred. So I can't tell you how many hours when I go down a rabbit hole to buy backer rod to strengthen the inside of this double bubble that I fold and duct tape and custom build all of these envelopes for my
Yeah.
fondant. I mean, hours upon hours upon hours. And as soon as I finished, and I had built, I think 125, and it was the time more than the money, right? Spending the money. Uh,
Mm.
my wife had bought something online, and this package came in, and I was like, "Where did you get this?" And a High Voly fondant packet fit right in there, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" So sometimes you have to earn, you have to do it the hard way before you
Yeah.
can see the easy
Yeah.
way, and it's been a fantastic process for keeping it warm.
Okay, so to help visualize this, you've got a Hive Life fondant pack. You
Yep,
put the envelope completely around it, and then you cut the hole through the double bubble and into one side of your fondant pack.
correct. And one of the guys on my team, Rodney, he 3D printed um, the so Hive Life has a blue cutter. I'm sure you've got one right there.
Mine are burgundy.
That one doesn't fit inside the hole. There you go. Perhaps that's the new model. Does that one fit in the R10 insulated inner cover?
It does not.
Okay.
In fact, the hole that it makes, it'll be teeth side down when you put it
Yeah.
in. It sits right on top of that insulated inner cover, so it's the
Okay.
same diameter.
So we've made two lengths of those teeth. That length that you're holding for me works really well with that 5 pound fondant. And I feel more comfortable with a smaller length of tooth for the 2.2 pound. So we 3D printed some 2.2s. And again, my partner Rodney, he made the diameter that fits down into that insulated inner cover actually fit snug. So when you lay it down, it kind of snaps in, and there's no, oops, did I hit the hole or did I not?
Yeah,
It's
people are
been great.
missing. They're missing the hole. Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe Cliff has been working with, is it Dairy?
You might have an NDA if you're talking about something that's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not
I,
saying that there's
no,
anything
I'm a
coming
rookie at this,
up,
so I don't know. Thanks for
but
not getting me in a lawsuit.
yeah, we just and I'm keeping that in by the way because loose
Uh,
lip sink ships and we're not we're not,
I'm gonna learn a lot today
but
from you, Fred.
okay, AJ. Well, that's a high bar. Anyway, no, so that's good stuff. And matching that up plus that insulated inner cover, we did the same thing here. When you made that shift, did you do that with all of your hives at once or did you do 50-50? How do you know? How did you gauge
I,
your improvement?
I'm kind of an all-in guy. Not when I make up my mind, it's typically all of it. I think the first year, I don't know if I could have afforded all of the insulated inner covers, so I started buying them gradually, right? But
Okay.
as soon as I saw the results, I just continued to work in that direction with Cliff's products.
Okay. And so, just a refresher, in Washington State, you said that you're in a microclimate that you're calling a frost pocket. Give us an idea of what the year looks like weather-wise there.
Well, I shouldn't speak too badly about it right now because it's about 58 degrees.
Yeah, of course.
Uh, I live at 588 feet, and so we live against a wood line. And when I built this first enclosure for the bees, it wasn't for bees; it was for a strawberry patch. And then I got bees to pollinate some fruit trees. Uh, the sunlight, the direct sunlight, does not touch that area from about November to March. And if it does get cold, 18, 20 degrees, it will stay like that for a week. And, 100 yards away on the pavement, it could be 25 degrees warmer just because of the pavement and the heat and the direct sunlight. So I'm not talking Minnesota. I'm not talking Pennsylvania, Maine weather, North Dakota weather. I just can notice quite a difference when I'm up here on the hill and we might receive snow. When I start to go down the hill into town into Redmond, there's no snow. So it's just a small microclimate. It's not extreme.
Mm-hmm.
It's very wet though, extremely wet.
So how many days out of the year is it raining?
Oh, a lot. No, not as many as people think, but it's a lot. It's
Yeah.
pretty gloomy from October to March. We've had some good springs lately. Um, Hoping that it gets colder so that the snowpack stays in the mountains. That's really important for us right now.
Because there is a Trident refit facility in the state of Washington. And do you know about that?
I don't.
Okay. It's a Navy thing. And somebody wrote a song called Life is Gray. And it was just because I don't think they got much sun at all. So it almost, I think the song was like, I'll never need a sun umbrella. I'm going to throw my swimsuit away because life is gray. And is that what your life is like there? You're lacking sunlight?
I moved out here from Maine in '97 to finish an internship for my schooling. I was headed in a certain direction, and I had heard all the woos and woes about it being, raining all the time. And I think this is the most beautiful place on the planet from June to September, October. And
June
I've
to
got used to the
September, October, then it gets ugly.
it gets gray and gloomy. Yeah, it does get gray and gloomy. It's better than snow though.
Wait, so is this considered like a rainforest?
Washington State has one of the most unique um, systems. Eastern Washington is primarily desert. In fact, when I drove across I-90 back in '97, when I hit Spokane and hit the border and drove for a couple hours, it was the flattest place that I encountered across the whole United States. And my heart started racing and the brain started going. And I said, what did I do? And then in the distance were these green hills, and then they became mountains. And so to answer your question, we have the Olympic Peninsula, which is rainforest. We have the Snoqualmie River in the Middle Fork of the Snoqualmie River. That is got more moss capita per maple tree, recorded in some record book. There's a few streets down the road that has a lot of real heavy mossed maples, which is great for springtime and the bees, as you know, the maple honey.
Mm-hmm.
But it's quite a difference between desert, rainforest, and a little in between.
Is that where Twilight, the series, was filmed?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. There's been a few movies out here.
Not to
No.
derail anything, but just to give people a sense of, what that looks like. And so are you surrounded by old growth forests and things
So
like that?
where I live specifically is in a place called Redmond Ridge, Novelty Hill, and it's east of just a little northeast of Seattle, just enough away from suburbia. I'm in unincorporated King County, so like they don't plow our 2 mile road. It's not their responsibility. And when I pull out of my main road here, I can take a right into the Duval, Carnation, Snoqualmie Valley, or I can take a left and go down into Redmond and towards the city area. So I'm really on the cusp of organic farmland along the Snoqualmie River, and then hills and foothills that eventually lead into the Snoqualmie Mountains. So it's very diverse.
Okay, so you mentioned organic farmland. And we have problems. Here in the state of Pennsylvania, the Department of Agriculture has a definition for what organic honey could be. And they also established that no beekeeper in our state could ever meet those requirements simply because of agriculture in our area and the fact that someone is treating with something somewhere. However, if you were in an area where you knew that everything was organic for several miles in every direction, you could actually have organic honey. Are you in an area like that?
I don't know if there's an area in the United States that falls under that category. I think you'd almost have to be on an island. I know several organic farmers, and we've had long discussions about the paperwork.
Mhm.
It's very, very, very difficult to get USDA organic certification.
Right now, I don't think we have any,
I,
right?
I, I don't think it's possible.
Is there, now I'm just throwing this out from memories in the 80s. Is there a Fox Island?
There could be. I'm
Oh,
not
you don't
familiar.
know where that is?
I don't. I
Dang
don't.
it.
I don't.
Okay. You know where Puget Sound is?
I do.
Okay. At
There's a
least we're on the
bunch of
same.
islands out there.
There's what?
There's a bunch of islands out there.
There's violence?
Islands.
Oh, I
Island.
thought you said there's a bunch of violence out there.
No,
Like,
no, no, no.
because there's a U.S. Navy ship
Yeah.
named Puget Sound. And I think is there a Puget Sound shipyard? I'm asking you stuff you don't know.
I think they call it, isn't it? Well, where I'm
Is
from,
it Bangor?
we call it Bangor, Maine.
Bangor. Yeah,
Here
yeah.
it's Banger. Everybody calls it Banger. It's a whole
But is that
different.
the same? There's a Bangor, Washington
There's Bangor Naval Airspace or
well,
Bangor Naval Station. Yeah.
in Washington.
Hmm.
Well, that's where the refit facility
There,
is.
there you go.
Dang it,
Yeah.
AJ, you're not
Yeah.
helping me. All right. So one of the things I want to talk about too is Rebel 44 doesn't seem to match up with Honey. But as a name, I'm thinking you carry a 44 caliber. You're a Clint Eastwood fan.
Yeah.
What is behind your logo and why you're calling yourself Rebel 44?
Um, in order for me to give that its true honor and breadth and depth of importance for me, I'd have to spend probably 10 minutes on it.
Do it.
Um,
You got time.
wow.
We have no
Okay.
stopwatch here.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to go. I've never done this in its full form. When I was a little boy, I grew up in Maine. I grew up with two older brothers and a sister. And one of my favorite pastimes was trout fishing. I was the youngest, about 8 years. They joked, I was either the marriage saver or an oopsie baby. Quite a difference between 8 and 9 years between siblings. And I was fishing with my older brother at Hosmer Pond, and we were trout fishing. And it was getting dark, and we were fishing on a ledge, and there was this little bright green fuzzball Canadian goose swimming along the ledge. And it still had that feed sac on it, kind of like our umbilical cord. As they mature, it eventually disintegrates or rots and falls off. But it's actually their feed sac when they're in the egg, from what I understand. And it still had part of that on it, so it almost seemed as if it was premature. My brother scooped it up and he said, "You need to take this home and take care of it. If you don't, it's going to die." And I was 6 years old, a little tiny 6-year-old boy, and I had a sweatshirt, and I stuck him in my front sweatshirt pocket. And by the time I got home, I pulled him. It was a 10-minute drive home. I pulled him out and I set him on the ground, and he looked at me and did the tweet, 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 and started chasing me. I was his dad. There was that immediate parental
Mhm.
attachment, and I had known nothing about that. And I say that because it was very vital for me. I grew up in a pretty uh, an alcoholic run family. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. It was my normal, so it was what I was used to. But not everybody was living under those circumstances. So to have this goose think I'm its dad and love me, I had this immediate, unconditional love attachment.
Mhm.
And he slept under my neck every night. Um, he went everywhere that I went. My parents would take me. My brothers and sisters finally were out of the house, and they would take me to all of these bar rooms along the mid coast Maine, the Wayfarer, the Trackside, the the Myrtle House, and all these fishermen would come in with pocketfuls of money. And they've been out to sea for 3 weeks, and by the time 10 o'clock would hit, chairs were getting thrown, and I would be in the corner feeding my goose with a meal dropper. That goose never left my side. And I named him Rebel. So that's my first ever unconditional love, and that's followed me my whole life. the 44, when I when I met Krista, Chris and I have been together for about 20 years. She had me meet an Vedic astrologist. His name was Matab, and had me sit down with him and go through where I was born and what time. And um, I remember he said, AJ, does the number 44 mean anything to you? And I said, yeah, it's one of my favorite numbers. And he said, well, when you turn 44 years old, your life is going to completely change for the better. Don't be surprised, but you're going to start seeing this on meal tickets, parking spaces. Those are the angel numbers, and the angels have been watching over you, protecting you ever since you were a little boy. And when he said it, he truly knew nothing about me or my history or my past or my childhood, but I felt like he looked into my soul. And even with that information, I was like, went about my way. And my wife was to my right, writing notes, basically a journal of everything he was saying. Um, and I think I was in my like 41 or 42 at the time.
Do you know what year that was?
2016.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I'm gonna digress a bit. When my brothers and sister got kicked out of the house for drinking and doing all the things that my parents taught them to do, right? Uh, I had started going to a teen program called Alateen, and I was going to this a meeting center where kids could go and listen and get some help. And I remember sitting in there. I was 12, and I was scared to death. I didn't want to go. I sat down beside this little girl, and she started sharing her story. And when she did, I did a double take because it sounded like she was in the next door in my house explaining everything that I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as she was done, a little boy to her left started sharing his story. And I did another double take because he was telling my story again. And that was the first time that I ever identified with a group and realized that I wasn't alone. And it was just a huge monumental feeling from a little boy that felt so alone. Um, my dad at the time was my God. He was everything to me. I'd go get beer out of the refrigerator and I'd sneak him into the car so we could go to the lake for the day. He was my buddy, and so he could do no wrong in my eyes. But I didn't like all the drinking and all the things that were going on at the house. He cornered me one night when I was coming home from one of those meetings, and he said, "Hey, AJ, where are you going? It's dark. Where are you at night?" And I remember putting my hands in my pockets and kind of kicking the ground. And I said, "Well, it's a place where I go where for kids and their parents might drink a little too much." And I said, "I need some help with this." And I just started to bawl, started crying, and didn't tell him he had a problem or my mom had. I just said that I needed some help. Well, that next day, he and I were on our way to Penn Bay Medical Center to a recovery meeting for him. And I'm happy to say that he's 38 years sober today. And so it was a huge monumental change in my life, these progressive steps that happen in our life.
Mm-hmm.
My mom didn't like that too much, and she went to a couple meetings with him, and then she finally left, and they got divorced after 26 years of marriage, and she moved back to her hometown in Texas. And I blamed myself as a kid. If I didn't get my dad to go to that meeting, it's still, all the things that kids do. I know that not to be true today.
Mm-hmm.
But when she left, she never called. Birthdays, Christmases, she was really on the run down there in West Texas. Her family kind of ended up disowning her because she was a handful. She had raised 4 kids and didn't have a job, and then was kind of thrown out. Took it on her own to kind of go out into the world and go back home, and she didn't get the support she wanted because of the sickness that she was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
When she did call, she would be in a bar room and she would be drunk, and she didn't want to talk to me. She would say, "I want you to talk to this person," and start passing the phone around to me in a bar room. And it broke my heart. And it caused me to create this wall and hate my mother. because it was easier to hate her than to be hurt by her. So at 13, up went the walls for the rest of my life. And I navigated that way. And I'm sorry if I get emotional. Uh, I went to college. I was in my first semester and I get a call that she's in ICU in West Texas, Odessa, Texas, Midland, Odessa. And I had saved about $2,500 from working in Bar Harbor, Maine that summer. And I left finals and I flew down and walked into this hospital room in ICU. And there was this big bloated jaundiced figure in bed on a respirator and catheter in all the life support. And she had the litany of things: acute pancreatitis, jaundice, the litany of things that would happen when you drink a lot of alcohol. And she was in a coma, and I sat there and for 2 weeks until I ran out of money. And the doctor finally said, she's not going to make it. Say your goodbyes. And I did that, and I came back to Maine, University of Maine, to straighten my finals out that I just left, up and left. 6 weeks later, she pulls out of this coma. It's a miracle. And I'm 19 now, and I have all of these answers, and I write a letter to her. Here's the problem, Mom, you're an alcoholic. I had all the answers at 19. I was going to fly down and tell her, what her problem was. That's the ignorance that I had. And I remember flying back down and seeing her. I think she tried to sue the hospital for putting a hole in her throat. I mean, it's just the alcoholic sickness, right? Mm-hmm. And then I gave her a letter. She read it, and she said, "That's nice." And as she's smoking a cigarette, and I remember coming back home, and she was off on the run again. So this just devastated me once again. In 2008, she was in and out of several ICUs, and I got the final call that she was, not going to make it. And I said my goodbyes to her on the phone, and they unplugged her, and she died. Now, through this process, you would think a guy like me that's had parents like that would never get into any trouble himself. But sometimes the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. And I got into recovery myself, started working with men and doing a program. And I wrote an amends list to my mom. I had psychology and psychiatry appointments. I was doing everything that I could to kind of get over the feelings that I had for my mom. But no matter what I did humanly, when I heard her name or thought about her, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And so I meet with Matab. He tells me when I turn 44 years, my life is going to change. And I turned 44 years, and I really got ingrained in recovery, got sober myself. And I started working with the bees. And everything changed. My wife had to go to California. I had heard the Swainson's thrush, and we can get into that. It was 4-4. And I said, I can't go. I need to put the honey supers on for the big leaf maple flower. And I was down in my apiary that I built because of a strawberry patch that propagated, that I built a strawberry garden and then put fruit trees in it. And then a deer was eating it, and I fenced it all in. So I didn't even get into bees for the reason of getting into bees. I got bees to pollinate this apiary that I built, this garden of fruit trees. And then I fell in love with the bees. And so a couple years into it, and I've now got 16 hives, and I still am bouncing along the bottom. I don't really know why I'm going down this path. And there's honeysuckle and butterflies and bunny rabbits and 2 million bees flying around, and it's a sunny day, and it's April 4th, and I'm putting a honey. I'll never forget the hive that I was putting it on. I went to put the honey super on the hive, and I said, man, it's April 4th. It's my mother's birthday. And I just started to cry. And it was as if memories, like flashcards, Fred, started flipping through the top of my head, of her teaching me how to garden and how to care for plants and how to grow things. And they just kept coming in, a vivid memory after memory after memory after memory. And I sat down against the hive, and I've got tears running down my face, and I'm downloading this information from I don't know where. It was as if my body couldn't handle it all, and it was as if my chest opened up, and every time a memory came in, the anger would cycle out, and the fear would cycle out, and the resentment would cycle out. Another memory, and it took like 20 minutes. I can't explain what happened or why it happened, but it was the biggest spiritual experience I've ever experienced in my life. And when it was over, when the memory stopped, I looked around, and this apiary that I built and all of this beautiful abundance that was around me, everything just went click. And I said, oh my God, my mother gifted me this. This is from my mother. And so now when I work with these bees, my mother's spirit, in the most kindest, gentlest, most beautiful way, is everywhere I look, everywhere I feel, everywhere I smell, everywhere I see. She gifted me this. And it took those steps to get to that point, to have that spiritual experience. I'm still processing it, obviously. I don't know what happened, but it was by far one of the most amazing, beautiful experiences I've ever had. And it was something that 12-step programs couldn't help, psychology, psychiatry. Those bees saved my life and saved my relationship with my mom. And she's not even with us, but she's with me every day when I'm out there. So when you see Rebel 44 and you think tactical assault, like you said, it's a real bait and switch. It has nothing to do with that. It's really about earth connection and healing and unconditional love, about a boy and his goose, and it's beautiful, and it's I'm trying to stay out of its way as it continues to move in a direction that it wants to go. So I almost look at it as an entity of its own.
Where was that apiary located? Because we talked about Texas, we talked about
it was at my home in the backyard. It's where I built my first apiary,
which is in Washington,
Redmond, Washington. Yeah,
Redmond, Washington. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a great story, and what's interesting is, and this is something I've been actually chasing down for a long time, and you've filled the spot really well. And it's being in the company of bees and having these moments and these contacts, these communications from somewhere else come to you while you're in the bee yard. This is why Hives for Heroes and programs like that are so important, because we pick people, or they pick the bees, or the bees pick them. I don't know what happens, but that are dealing with something profound, and then they find comfort in the company of bees, but they also find premonition, and they also find revelation, and they find all of these things that occur in the company of bees, which it's hard to get people to pin down exactly why that happens, only that we hear about it. And now you've shared, and by the way, thank you for sharing that deeply personal experience, because people have this comfort that comes to them in the company of bees, and it makes them want more, and they don't necessarily have to understand anything about bees. Like you said, you don't have to check all the boxes and detail exactly what's going on. And it sounds like traditional medicine and therapy and counselors and things like that don't do what somehow can happen naturally. And I'm not suggesting to anyone listening or watching that you don't listen to your counselors or the professionals, but there are things that happen in partnership with that. Let's say, if you go to a bee yard, you can find yourself altered when in the presence of bees. So I think that's really interesting. You also hit on something about your goose, because they do imprint on people, so do ducks, waterfowl in particular. Chickens don't do that. Chickens could care less. But But a goose or a duck, when they're first out of their egg, the first thing they see, the first living anything, and it can even be a stuffed goose, by the way, because I've done that. They'll attach to that, and that becomes their parent. And this is how I used to get our teenage daughter to come home and hang out if we said new ducks were about to hatch out of their eggs, because if she was in their company, they would sit on her shoulder, under her hair, watch TV, and she had friends, of course. But so these connections all tie together, I think, throughout your life up into the 44 aspect, which also happens to be your mom's birthday, which is super interesting. Um, so now let's move forward into what you're doing today. You've expanded beyond that. You really are doing micro honey, or
Yeah.
talk about your honey gathering and the way you find out when and where to source the nectar for your colonies and how you use it. Because this is how we met.
Yeah.
Um, we, of course, sampled honey that I would have told you before the North American Honeybee Expo. I don't care about the flavor of honeys, they don't necessarily do that much for me. But when you gave your explanation and we tasted some of that honey, so now I'm a little different. So that actually was different honey. So if we could talk a little bit about where you are now and why these tiny honeys that are so kind of micro processed or micro gathered, how does that work?
Yeah. So, this has just been a progressive journey for me, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think I stated, at Nabi, you were one of the guys that I really watched online in the beginning. I had a bee mentor that I met at a bee club, and then COVID hit, right? So everybody kind of scattered, and I think he had come over when I first got my bees and went through the hive with me once. And he lived, in his defense, he lived far away, was building a home, um, you know, his own life, but I would beat this guy up with questions.
Mhm.
His name's Joe C, and God, he was just such a great amount of information. And then I kind of started listening to Thomas Seeley and Randy Oliver, and then I found your channel, and I was glued to it. So um, I took that information and then I just immersed myself with the bees, right? And they progressively overwintered, and it's been a learning curve the whole time. I remember trying to put some feed on, 5 years ago, before uh, to get them going for spring, and they weren't drinking it. They weren't taking it in, and their flight pattern had changed. They were flying over my head into the forest where they normally went to the northeast,
Mhm.
down into the valley. and and I thought, what are they doing? And I turned around and there were these big maple flowers. And so that's when I started getting the idea of doing the maple honey. So there's uh, there's three major nectars, actually four, that I can get in general in 6 or 7 of the yards that I have set up now. So now I have yards set up at different elevations, um, actually quite close proximity. Bees will travel, correct me if I'm wrong, 20 to 25 square miles, depending on, how much pollen or nectar is in that area. But I have 3 apiaries that are a mile and a quarter, a mile and a quarter. It's a triangle, but they're on different hillsides and at different elevations. My house is 588 feet. The yard across the valley is at 204 feet, and there's one at the base of the valley on the Snoqualmie River at 44 feet. You would think, because of the close proximity, all those nectars would taste the same, and they don't. And that's what I found so fascinating. And that was just through trial and error of having the one yard expanding into another, having an expectation that the honey's probably going to taste the same, and it just didn't. So um, that Swainson's thrush, it's a dual vocal cord thrush that makes a migration to South America. It's a 1,500-mile journey. It's a tiny bird. You know much more about birds than I do, but I was very privy to this bird showing up and letting out their call. And it was always around April 4th. And that was just my cue to put the honey supers on for the big leaf maple flower. Now, the human calendar is static. So by listening to the environment, she may show up on March 31st.
Mhm.
She might not show up until April 10th. I don't do anything until I hear that bird come back and make her call. So to me, the human calendar is a static, roundabout. It's about this time of year. But by tuning into the environment a little bit more, it seems to to be a little bit more precise of, because they know what's going on. We think we do, but we don't.
Mhm.
Um, I do micro nectar flows with the bees. So I will leave those honey supers on for about 3.5, maybe 4 weeks. So like the prime time of when that flower is in full bloom. So if I leave them, then the cascara tree starts to get in the elderflower, the alder, there's other things that start to bloom, right? And then now you're mixing different nectars. So what I found is different yards at different elevations. Some areas are heavy in maple. The one down in the valley that you tasted, I think, and Paula tasted, about a week into that big leaf maple flower flow, 3 acres of dandelion bloom. I mean, it's a yellow carpet, and those bees just make love to that dandelion, and you can actually taste that nuance layered on top of the maple. And then a week later, the hawthorn tree bloomed. The hawthorn trees bloom on their farm, a big white flower. And then beginning of May, in that location, the fruit trees start to blossom. And then I pull the honey on May 8th. And so you've got these layers of nectars that the bees did. It's nothing that I've done. It's specific to that yard, at that environment, in that microclimate. And I've done that. I opened that yard 3 years ago, and they've done almost the exact same thing 3 years in a row. And I can't believe it, because none of my other yards, they're different every year. But that layered nuance has been just, it's a crowd favorite. So that's been a ton of fun.
Well, and that's the first time, because by the way, we just did another taste test here at our house, and we pulled your interview with Paula up on the big screen, and we all had the honey there, and we tasted along with you because we felt it was important that you explain. Here's the other thing: was I under the power of suggestion? I don't know what's going on, because you talk about what we taste first, then you talk about the second, the kind of follow-on flavor that comes in, and then at the end you're going to taste this, and we're all like, is that mass hypnosis? Because we are tasting. See, it never occurred to me that you would have an onset taste, then kind of your taste buds relax or something, and then there's a follow-on or an aftertaste.
Yeah.
What is that about? Like, why don't you taste it all at once? What is this delayed flavor that comes in? What's
Well,
that about?
I don't know. But all I can share with you is that I'm very present and aware when I'm working with my bees. I've never been so present in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and if I don't go in there, if I go into the apiary with my bees, with my day job on my mind, and I'm angry about something, those bees let me know with a quickness. So they kind of force help to help keep me present and engaged with them. And it was just what I noticed in that environment of literally the big leaf maple flower first, a week
Mm-hmm.
into that, the dandelion. And so when I tasted it, I could literally taste those
Mm-hmm.
notes at those times. And you get down into the hawthorn and the fruit, I can definitely taste a fruit note at the end. Um, but the fact that it's layered, to me, I've never tasted a honey like it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Same time of year, 3 miles to the west, slightly northwest at 480 feet, I have this beautiful piece of property that a woman lets me put bees on. It's in the middle of the woods below Bear Creek in Woodinville, and it's very wet. There's a lot of skunk cabbage, which is one of the first flowers that bees go into in March. It's actually a little warmer in there, right, Fred? So they can
Yeah.
heat them up. They
Skunk
get a little bit.
cabbage, 20 degrees warmer than the environment it's in.
Is Yeah, it's
Yep.
pretty incredible.
Yep.
But during that, this is all through serendipity, right? I was targeting the big leaf maple flower. I was just going to try another elevation. Um, well, that area is heavily wooded with cascara, the cascara tree. And I think it's considered kind of a wetland alder. It has a little teeny tiny white flower, and they're so small you can hardly see them on the tree. But I'm telling you, when I was out there walking the property, I could hear my bees all over it. And I was like, this is interesting. So, as big as that big leaf maple flower flow is in Washington state, and in my opinion, I think it's the biggest flower flow in the state. The problem is inclement weather, the days are shorter. If you compare that to the Himalayan blackberry, which starts about June 3rd to July 15th, it actually flowers all the way into October. It just depends on how much sunlight, what elevation, because it's constantly growing. The large mass amount of blooming happens for me in these yards in that June 3rd to July 15th.
Mhm.
Back to the cascara, the big leaf maple flower um, blooms, and that cascara blooms right after it. And those bees, the forager bees, I don't know why, they've done it 3 years in a row. They have decided to override and go after the cascara tree instead of the big leaf maple flower. And I know the big leaf maple flower is very prevalent. That
Mhm.
honey tastes completely different. And I think I gave you a sample of that. It's got this woodsy, buttery, earthy tone to it that's
What's the
completely
label?
different.
What's the label
It's
say on that
called,
one?
I call it forest blossom.
Forest Blossom.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
that.
And I'm happy to, you know, take anybody through a nectar flight. So that's what we do over here. We every year before last year, I had sold out like that. I think um, they share about 12% of their honey. They go into winter with the rest of it.
Mhm.
I'm really adamant about making sure that they go in with what that's their basement food, right? That's what
Yep.
allows them to survive. And through word of mouth and through my day job, I do have a day job. I sell a 30-year career in structural steel. I have clients that I have long standing relationships with, and people started getting wind of this honey, and I would sell out every year out of my truck. So I'm driving around, I've got a truck full of honey, and it was gone year after year. Well, this year, because the bees keep doubling, 1 to 8 to 16 to 34 to 55 to 105, um, they started sharing more honey. And so I looked at my wife. I said, "Man, that's a lot of honey. We should probably start doing some community events." And that's when we did. And it's just been building in at least in this small area.
Do you ship that honey, or
I
you're
do.
sold out locally? So do
Yeah,
you
I ship
still?
it nationwide. In
So you
fact,
do. So
yeah. In fact, after our little nectar flight, I was on vacation, as you know,
mhm.
and the boat I was on had Starlink, and I just flicked my phone on for a minute, and my Shopify started taking off. So thank you. I've sent honey to all of those people, and I've also offered them to take them through a nectar flight so that they'd have a better understanding
Oh,
of what's going on. So,
here's what I like about that. You could, you're probably already doing it, but I mean, we're zooming right now.
yeah,
So if somebody bought a flight of your honey, then you could do this tasting through the internet. Is that what you're doing, or are you
cor-
traveling?
correct. So 99% of the time, I'm doing it at events. So when I sell my honey, I have my decanters of honey out, the different colors, because all the questions come up. How'd you color it? How'd you flavor it? All of these, I didn't know either.
Right.
So to share with people that these are hyper locally targeted nectar flows from specific flowers to the best of my ability, maple, blackberry, Japanese knotweed, uh, uh, pure fireweed honey. That I mean, look at that. It's water white.
Yeah,
It's
so
crazy.
clear. Yeah.
Um, the Japanese knotweeds a couple weeks later, and it's black, full of resveratrol. So to give them taste tests there, I have so many people come up to these shows and they'll say, "I don't even like honey," and I'll say, "Well, taste this," and
That's yeah. Yeah.
they'll get a step and a half, and they'll turn around and they'll say, "What is that?" And they're walking away with 2 bags of 6 different
Yeah.
varietals, and they're almost speechless because here's what I found is that, including myself, I've navigated my whole entire life without ever having real honey. Somehow, some way, and then to share this with people excites me, that they get to taste these different nuances and to see people light up, and they're just their brain and their taste buds are telling them one thing, but their brain is telling them something completely different, like this isn't honey. And
Yeah.
it's just been a real joy to do that,
Yeah, and
to
we
share.
should pause here real quick and just mention, I will, the website is rebel44.com, REBEL 44.com. And Rebel 44 in the background there, but there was no .com and stuff, so I had to clear it up. So,
I have
but
an
yeah, so if people
Instagram.
are listening and or watching right now, the link will be down in the video description as well. But what you just described, the whole idea of, because I'll be honest, I didn't give a hoot about honey. I put it in my tea or I put it in coffee. It seems it's definitely not, on the shelf big box store honey, the honey that we're having in our own backyards. But I think part of this too is the environment that your bees are foraging in, and because we get some spring honey that's pretty distinctive, it tastes great, but I wouldn't have been over the top about it. So just as you've described, um, when you taste it, understanding more about what you're about to taste, what it is, and then having all those different varietals in these little jars. Is that the standard jar size, by the way? Is that
No,
those little? Oh, it
no,
isn't. What are
no,
the?
no. So the jars I have hold about 18 and a half ounces
Okay.
on online, and that's all on the website, on my website.
And do you have plenty of honey right now?
I'll be out of the maple, the spring varietals. Um, well, I'm doing the Seattle Flower and Garden Show
Yeah.
down at the convention center
Yeah.
at the end of this month, and my guess is after that I won't have any. But we're right around the corner to May, so it's been a
Right.
nice overlap. I've got a fair amount of the blackberry because, like we spoke,
Hmm.
longer work days. Those bees can start at 6 a.m. and
Yeah.
sometimes they don't come in till 9. It's that time of year and it's warmer. Um,
Okay.
it shows on the website what's available, what's not.
Okay.
I also have there's a events page on there where we'll be, which has been just in the state locally primarily.
Hmm.
But there's one thing I just want to mention, and I don't want to get too far away from that. This really hasn't even been about honey for me,
Right.
if
Yep.
that makes any sense.
No. Yeah, I know
Um,
exactly.
in the story that I shared with you, it's really about earth connection and helping people get back to
Mhm.
that earth connected state because we all came from that. We all possess it. And I
Mhm.
think in this day and age, with technology, especially in AI, we just kind of, I'm speaking of myself, go through life unconsciously. What I eat, what I say, what I do,
Yep.
and so what we've done is we do immersion experiences in one of our teaching yards, and you would sign up and come out with your family or group, and we would pick a day, hopefully in the middle of the day on a nectar flow. It's when the bees are most sweet. But I have 30 different bee jackets. I suit everybody up, and we actually go into those bees for 2.5 hours, and we go through and do a hive inspection. And by the end of that, everybody is hearing that C harmonic and that cadence and that reverberation. And next, they're holding a frame with nurse bees and bee bread and foragers and the queen. And we see the larvae in different stages. And there's something happens.
Hmm.
I can't explain it, um, but I can tell you, everybody that's gone through that, it's like a Pandora's box is opened, and
Hmm.
they're now we're present again, and we're talking about what's going on in that hive. And I've seen grown men cry in there because their granddaughter is so engaged. You
Hmm.
know,
Yep.
I've 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 seen things happen in there that are very personal for people, but it's literally changed their lives and set them on a whole new course
Hmm.
just for that bit of earth connection and presence.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, because it's lacking in our practices today. And I wouldn't say that, like, when we get people that visit bees out here or walk into the observation hive building or something like that, it's not across the board. Some of them are just like, okay, can I go now? Especially
yeah,
when it comes to little kids, my grandchildren in particular. But there'll be one child that gets a connection,
yeah,
and it wakes them up, and they're suddenly engaged. And it's the same thing that works, like I said, for these older people. It's not a connection that everyone is open to. It sounds like you have a really high success rate with the people that come and visit there, but I'm just looking for the one or two people in the group that I call them my people then,
yeah.
because they understand it. And it's the same thing because they know we're not selling anything. We don't
Right.
push anything. We're just giving them an experience and showing them what's going on. They get excited about the bees. And of course, the wider animals that are around our bees. And I recently posted a jumping spider video, and people unsubscribed over that. And they want to let you know. And that's okay, because those are not my people. That's
Can't
just
make
what.
everybody happy, Fred.
Because, well, no, and that's just it. The goal is not, I don't think, to make everyone happy. And it's also I think hopefully, which is why maybe what I was talking about got your attention early on, is this is patient beekeeping. This isn't. I'm not trying to get you the A to Z and how to make money off of your bees right now this
Yeah.
year, or turn it into a business. That's not the goal. I just want you to appreciate what I see. And of course, when people are present with the bees, they can appreciate what the feeling of being in that location, because all your senses are engaged now,
Yeah.
and that's something you don't get online. So I think you're doing a great thing with that. And I think your wife is also involved in giving those immersive experiences.
She is, yeah. So she's very earth connected. And jokingly, my last name is Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
This whole journey, I don't know if I even had a choice in this,
Mm-hmm.
because it all started with that strawberry that propagated. That I built a strawberry patch. The bees weren't even on the radar, and I built the strawberry patch, and a deer was eating it. So I built a fence, and then I went and got more fruit trees, and I thought, who's going to pollinate this?
Mm-hmm.
Then she bought me this beautiful sign that says the Rebel 44 Abundance Garden, and it has been nothing shy of complete abundance, and that's just in our yard. And of course, the bees outgrew that. Yeah, she does all of the tasting events with me. When we do these, we're going to start doing them again now. January was a break for us,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to get back into it now, and that's just a caveat what you had said about the success rate. A lot of the people that we meet that do the immersion experiences, we
Mm-hmm.
meet at those tasting events. So they're
Right.
already engaged. Like we've
Mm-hmm.
created a connection. And that's when the people that are get filtered out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what's been a benefit for us is those people circle back around and they'll say, "Hey, we'd really like to do that immersion experience."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think the success rate's the way it is. But when we finish that immersion experience, I have an overlander truck that we camp and hike in, and I set it up as a bee mobile too. So I pull an awning out and a table, and I do a full nectar flight after the immersion experience on the Snoqualmie River, and everybody gets to taste what we just experienced from the bee seasonality in there, and that's just another connection. So we really try to make it as well-rounded of an experience as we can for people.
Mm-hmm. Now, give us a sense of scale. How many hives are you up to now?
So I started with one. My overwinter rates have been unprecedented, really well. And 6 years, I was at a peak this summer of 180. Now that included a bunch of queens that I had grafted in nukes. So when I actually went into winter, I started, taking two nukes and putting it into a hive, and even a couple of those were light. But I went into winter with about 140
Mm-hmm.
strong, what I considered strong hives, and I think I've still probably had 4 or 5 that are pretty weak. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I've seen 6 hives lost so far in all the yards. So um, it's more than I'm used to, but I have more bees than I know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd love to go through perfect and not have any loss, but that's
Mm-hmm.
just not the truth of the reality. But I can share with you, they have low mites, they have a clean, warm, dry cavity, they have tons of resources. And then there's other things that happen that I may not always catch. The downfall with having so many hives and trying to run that with a full-time job is I don't get to do as many hive inspections as I like to. There's a benefit to that
Mm-hmm.
from the first year beekeeper that wants to go in every 4 days,
Right.
right? But there's also a benefit if you miss something where a queen was superseded or they can't make a new queen, you can't interject. So
Right.
there's pluses and minuses to both.
Now, you mentioned you're doing standard Langstroth 10s. You have a couple of 8s now. Any other, you're looking at horizontal hives or anything?
If it was up to me, I'd have one of everything. But
Yeah.
as you've said on your channel, the efficiency,
Mm-hmm.
none of my bees are on a pallet four stacked with a
Right.
migratory cover.
Right.
They all have their own custom stand. They're a foot apart from each other. They have that outer Bee Smart design cover. This is not commercial fast track beekeeping. So for me to add, I do have interest in adding that long Langstroth where I can use the same frames. The problem is I have big black bear here, and all of my yards are fenced, electric fenced, solar powered, and I learned that the hard way at my house. And I'm kind of out of room at my house to set up a new spot for a long Langstroth, but I do have interest in trying one of those. I'm kind of watching to see how successful you are with it.
With my long lang,
Yeah,
that thing out here, that thing is bear proof. I'm going to call it right now because the bears show up out here, although I scare the bears. So,
yeah.
and you had, so you have electric fences. What about, how are you keeping deer out of your garden? Deer right now, I'm not kidding you, AJ, I have a herd of deer. A
Yeah.
herd. In fact, I'm about to put out a video that's going to mess with people's heads because the deer are walking around on their hind legs. So just between me and you,
Getting the fruit off the trees.
I'm going to edit out all the parts where they're walking on all fours, and I'm only going to have all the series of deer walking on hind legs. So just between the two of us,
Uh,
I'm going to put that out
I,
just because I like to do
uh,
that. So what's going on with these deer? Is this the missing link? Is what's happening? But
well,
what do you do to keep the deer out of your garden?
well, kind of missed a big part of this whole story. As I've stated, I grew a strawberry, it propagated. I told my wife I'm going to go down to the back 40 and build a strawberry patch. We have some acreage up here, and you know, 2x6s, 10 feet, built a square with the mylar or the landscape fabric and organic dirt. And I planted all of these strawberry starts. That's where I was that day. And I started walking up the hill doing this, and 30 seconds, I turned around and there's a black-tailed doe dead center of that strawberry patch looking at me. And I said, don't do it. And as she's looking at me, Fred, she reaches down and she grabs that strawberry and is chewing it, and the roots are dangling. And I said, this is not for you. So I called one of my friends in the lumber industry and ordered what I thought to be a large lumber package with a pallet of concrete. And I made this 20 by 40-foot structure. And then I used welded wire fabric, 6 10 welded wire mesh that you would put in concrete for commercial slabs.
Hmm.
Um, and I built custom doors, my buddy and I, Garrett. And after 2 weeks, that was done. And so now I've got this strawberry patch in this 20 by 40-foot fenced in there. And I thought, man, this looks empty. I'm going to go to Flower World and get some fruit trees. So I got raspberry trees, peach tree, a pear tree, a hybrid apple tree, a fig tree, 8 different types of blueberries, and I way overplanted it. And then that's when I cracked the sparkling water, and I'm sitting there and I thought, oh my gosh, who's going to pollinate this? The bees are dying. I read the news, and I
Yeah.
better get some bees. And that's when I took my beekeeping class. So to answer your question, that welded wire fabric keeps them out. I can't
Okay.
have anything outside of that apiary, blueberries or a new fruit tree, because they'll eat it right down to the ground. The other yards, um, I'm more concerned about the bears. The deer don't go into those fenced areas either, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if they did. I don't know what they would do for harm. I don't have the skunk issue that you've talked about.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's mostly bear.
Okay. Well, the deer browse right through my apiary daily, so they don't care. I even have one walking on two legs in my
I
apiary
can't
as of
I can't
last
wait for
night,
that
by the way.
video.
What's that?
I can't wait for that video.
Yeah, it's just, I have a dry humor and I'm going to pretend to be puzzled and not understanding why the deer have adapted to walking on two legs. I don't know. But so what is next for you? What's coming up with what are your plans for things you're going to offer to the public, or what are you doing with your own bees? Something you don't know you need to know? What's happening?
Boy, that's a great question, Fred. I never meant this to get as large as it is, and it's not large, but I never set out to have X amount of hives and 14 varietals of honey and doing shows. I'm definitely passionate about it. I love what I do. It's very challenging to do that in a full-time job. I think if money were no object, I would love to somehow create a Rebel 44 Bee Steward Academy for children and for adults, and to teach, help facilitate that presence of learning and really the root of that is the earth connection and presence.
Mhm.
Um, and for everybody, not just children.
Mhm.
I would also love to get a brick and mortar, but then we're talking retail business, and we have a winery. Woodinville is well known for wineries. There's over 150, if not more. Chateau Saint Michel, and so there's a lot of wine tasting areas around there. And I think to have a Rebel 44 honey tasting room would be just a nice offset for people that don't necessarily want to drink or want to take a drink along, or take a break as they're doing this hopping along the wineries. I'd like to partner with more chefs like Chris Weber with the Herb Farm. We've had the privilege of working with him in his Five Diamond Herb Farm restaurant with an H. It's world renowned. There's 47 of them in the world, so he only uses our honey on his menu. It would be the things that he does with it are things that I would never even dream of doing. Like, I'll give you an example. We've had the privilege of being his featured farmer 2 years in a row for his 100-mile dinner, and that 100-mile dinner is where they harvest food within 100 miles of the chandelier of the restaurant. And they go into great detail of where they pick the pear from this 100-year-old, pear tree on this certain farm. He took that clear fire, the fireweed, and he brought it to 30 bricks, which means he added spring water to it. And then he chilled it. And he served it as the dessert drink for our featured farmer dinner. And by making that honey drinkable, the herbal notes that started to pop out of the honey, it blew my mind. It's things that you can't taste in the honey in its honey form, but by watering it down, and it literally opens up all the floral notes. And so just things like that are so impressive of what he does. So I'd love to do more of that. For
Is that
people
clear
that,
fire the only thing he uses? Does he like
oh
any of your
no,
other varieties?
oh no, he's used the blackberry, he's used the spring maple. He actually, when we first met, he had gotten a blackberry, a maple, and the Equinox Dark, which is Japanese knotweed. Very colored differences. And on his menu under milk and honey, it's a 10-course, 4.5-hour meal, the most brilliant meal you'd ever have. I think his motto is never make this at home, but it's a delight. It's definitely a once in a lifetime must do meal. He, under milk and honey, he actually served our honey as the serving. There was a strip of maple, there was a strip of the blackberry, and there was a strip of the Japanese knotweed, which we call Equinox Dark, which I intentionally harvest that on the autumn equinox. That's why we call it that. So there's intention behind everything that we do. Whether it's relevant to people or not, there's always something. There's a reason for everything that we're doing, or why we're naming it something, or when we harvest it. I don't know if it makes a difference. It feels right in my heart, and that's why we do it. And I think the taste speaks for itself. I really do.
Wow. Okay. You need to share one thing about yourself that nobody knows. One skill that you have, one life event that you had, something you saw, anything that you've not shared before that's interesting.
Do you want me to embarrass myself, or it's something cool?
No, you don't. I have no parameters.
I'm gonna go embarrassment.
Okay.
When I moved out here, I got my degree in kinesiology and exercise physiology from the
Wait,
University of
stop. You said that so fast. Is that kinesthesiology?
Kinesiology, the study of human movement.
Kinesiology.
Yeah. And I did my internship at Valley Medical Center, and was eventually going to become a cardiologist or a physical therapist, or both. That's the direction I was going when I moved out
Oh,
here from Maine.
let me pause you again for a second and see if I've been saying something wrong my whole life. Kinesthesis, a familiar movement.
Yeah, sure.
Did I say that right?
The study of it is kinesiology, though.
Okay, but
Kinesthesis is correct.
kinesthesis is like
Yeah,
if I do the same thing over and
yeah,
over
yeah,
in the
sure.
dark, upside down, whatever,
Yeah,
until eventually it's second. Okay, that's
yeah,
kinesthesis.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I'm right. Go ahead, AJ, continue.
During my internship, I had to do a lot of things at the hospital. They had a fitness facility. I worked in the cardiac rehab. I worked in physical therapy. Uh, I had to get certified as a prenatal aerobics instructor and do water aquatics exercises for pregnant women.
Okay.
And it was awesome. There's an embarrassment for me.
Oh, that was your that was your embarrassing story?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Doing
Yeah.
aquatics
Yeah,
instruction for
yeah. So I'm
prenatal?
standing up on the platform and I'm, got the paddle in my hand and there's
Yeah.
music going and I'm doing the rocking
Okay.
horse and there's all these pregnant women in the pool, trying to keep up. Yeah, it was comical.
All right. All right. Well, AJ, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. I hope that people that are listening and watching will follow up and check into your website. And also, there is a YouTube channel by the same name. So if people
Oh
want to check
God.
that out, you don't seem to publish very much on that.
I
You're shaking your head no. Do
well,
not
I'm
go to
just
the YouTube.
no there I did 9 or 11 videos a couple years ago and
Okay.
it's
But go to the website. The most up-to-date stuff is at the website.
and Instagram, Rebel 44 Adventures.
Rebel 44 Adventures on Instagram.
Yeah.
Now your honey varietals are at different price points, I'm guessing, or are they all the same?
No, they're at different price points. So I do have on the website, there's the 4 ounce jars,
Yeah.
there's the big 18 and a half ounce jars, and some of the specialty honey, like the Clear Fire, we have it in a 9 ounce jar, a mid range.
Mm-hmm.
You'll just have to see which one is available on there. The Japanese knotweed, the Equinox Dark, is sold out. It was all pre-saled and then sold out. I think I had a few for a show. We're going to start a waiting list for that soon.
Oh man, the pressure of a waiting list. I don't know if I
Yeah,
like that at all.
it's a prepaid waiting list. So
Okay.
when we didn't do the prepaid waiting list, there were like 500,
Okay, I
and I had to
gotcha.
call them all. So if they prepay, they're in. So
Okay, and then what happens if we get a bad year?
I start dishing out a bunch of money back to people.
Okay, they just so it's 100% guarantee they get it or they get
Oh,
a payback.
1,000%. Oh,
No,
my
no
goodness. Yeah.
substitutions, no dandelion honey substitution.
No, no.
What does dandelion honey taste like?
Gosh, it's got this. There's almost I don't want to say it's bitter. I have never had pure dandelion honey. All I can share was my experience with the spring bloom. So underneath that maple, which is kind of an echinacea eucalyptus, almost minty flavor,
Mm-hmm.
there's that band of dandelion that's almost got a, a bitter kick to it, but it's not bitter because it's still enveloped with sweetness, but it just lingers through that spring bloom. And then the hawthorn kicks in at the fruit note. Um, Probably not a good guy to ask that.
Are they getting a lot of nectar from dandelions? I can't tell if, I mean, the nectar flow seems to really kick in when the dandelions are all in bloom, but how much of that is really from the dandelions? I know they're all over it, but
Well,
they're also getting a lot of
yeah,
pollen from it.
I don't. The pollen is massive, right?
Right,
Incomplete amino acid profile, but it's helpful.
right, yeah.
Um, I don't know how much nectar. I've never had my honeys tested on uh, percentages of nectars, and I think we had shared
Mm,
before. If you go get your honey tested, a pollen profile, that doesn't necessarily tell you that
right,
how much nectar of each one is. You might have 50% dandelion and pollen in 5% nectar, and that's where I would guess it would be a
yeah,
lot more pollen than nectar. Two completely different tests,
yeah. Because
exorbitantly expensive.
I can't tell what I'm drinking or what I'm
Yeah,
eating because
yeah.
we have acres of milkweed for the bees, and I don't know if it's milkweed honey that I'm
What color
tasting.
is it? The honey.
I think the honey's really light. How would I know? I can't tell. No, I'm serious. It happens at a time when there's so many other varieties out there, but the bees work milkweed heavy. In fact, the milkweed produces so much nectar you can shake it off the milkweed at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and get drips out of it. So there has to be a substantial amount of honey coming from it, but we can't use any pollen markers to identify it because they don't get milkweed pollen.
That's the third thing I
So
want to do.
what's
When I
that?
win the lottery, I want to take, you know, I want to have a truck that I can drive 40 to 50 hives to a place like Mount Rainier National
Yeah.
Park, which is in Washington State, and drive to 8,000 feet in August when there's a spring flower flow, and hit the emergency brake and open those entrances to those bees and say, show me what you can do at 8,000 feet. And just go to different climates and different areas, even in the state, Artist Point at Mount Baker,
Yeah.
Hurricane Ridge and Olympic Peninsula, Mount Rainier, Mount Hood,
Yeah.
those, 8,000 to 9,000 feet when it's middle of August and it's just becoming spring.
Yeah. So I've seen these livestock trailers that are modified for, it looks
Yeah.
like an AZ hive setup.
Yeah.
When you bring your hives to these areas, are you unloading and putting them out on the ground, or are they they're in a
No,
vehicle?
in my dream, I've got full clearance to just pull that trailer up, hit the e-brake, unhook it, and then
Yes.
sleep in my truck tent
And stay there with it, right?
and stay there with them
Yeah.
for
And
4.5
somehow the
days.
suspension on the vehicle also has a weight scale built into it, so you know when they're taken on.
Correct.
And when you got the load, you pack up and you
And
leave.
divide by 40. I know what's in each hive. It's perfect.
Okay. All right. I'm green lighting that activity, AJ. Tell your
Please,
wife I approve the investment. Go
appreciate
ahead.
it.
And thanks a lot. This has been a great interview. I really appreciate talking with you. And thanks for all that you've shared about your life and what you're currently doing with your bees.
Thank you for the platform, Fred, and thank you for everything that you do. I just want to say, I don't know if you realize how many people you've helped in this industry to learn in the knowledge that you've shared. I'm forever grateful for what you've shared with me, because it's helped me become the bee steward I am today. So thank
Wow.
you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're
That's
welcome.
great. Thanks, AJ. And that wraps up another episode of Interviews with Experts. Listen to AJ's story. It's clear that the honeybee revolution is about far more than just managing hives. It's about the profound impact these incredible insects have on the human spirit. AJ's journey from the challenges of his early years in Maine to finding his true north in apiaries of Washington is a testament to the healing power of nature and the resilience of the heart. I want to extend a huge thank you to AJ Gardner of Rebel 44 for his honesty and for showing us that sometimes the best way to find yourself is to get lost in a world of honeybees. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider subscribing and sharing the episode. Every share helps us bring these vital stories to a wider audience. Until next time, I'm Frederick Dunn, and this has been The Way to Be.